when you go into, I go see a show, I go to hot dogs, and the presenter gets up at the beginning, this is in Toronto, and they make a little 3-minute speech, or 1 minute. Nobody's paying attention. What do they say? And what do they say that moment for 90% of the time, which happens whether you're having a showing or you're having a performance, 90% of the time, nobody's listening, nobody remembers. That is an opportunity, not just in that moment, but in every moment like that. And not only in the moments when you are called on personally to use your voice, but in all of the ways that you or your organization communicates with the world. Hi, I'm Josh. I am a brand strategist who creates strategies which helps clients in a variety of sectors be more successful. Hi, I'm Josh. I help you figure out why you matter and project that to the world. Today is my birthday, and that's true. So there's my birthday. There is no better way to get an audience on your side than to be like, it's my birthday. So even if you don't enjoy today, it's my birthday. No, at the end. I don't have time for that. So who, like between those two Joshes, who would you rather talk about, go see, follow, remember? And in your own organizations or your own lives and your own crafts, what story is most likely to garner you attention? To attract donors or appeal to donors, to attract new members of the audience, generate subscriptions, win you a grant, transcend the show, by which I mean so that, for instance, it's not just people coming once and then going away, and what they carry away is the experience of that one exhibit or performance, but actually something that extends beyond that. And that's all we're here to talk about today. So the good news is stories are free, right? Like, it actually doesn't cost anybody anything to come up with a better story. And it's almost like you can go, I can stand up here and I can mumble, or I can stand up here and speak in a loud voice with words that everybody can understand. And that's the choice that we're going to talk about making. Now, when you think about, so how do we get to that? How do we think about that? What's the heart of that? It's really why you matter. And that is the intersection of two things. It's how you think about yourself and how your audience thinks about you. That really breaks down to pretty basically 3 key pieces. The first is because you're different. If you are not different, nobody will stop to look at you. It is price of entry, right? And in all of our worlds, the truth is, there's a billion guys like me, right? So how do I be different when actually, honest to God, the services we provide are very similar, the process is very similar? How do I stand out from that so at least you'll look at me twice? Because you believe in what we're trying to do or what I'm trying to do, right? Is there a sense of purpose beyond the show, beyond the performance, beyond the exhibit, beyond this piece? That's something that somebody can actually want to follow. And finally, because they like you. And in actuality, when you do it right, and the questions that we're going to talk through answering today, actually, they kind of start here. Because again, what we're looking for is that intersection between how your audience thinks and feels, and what they care about, and what you care about. So you can't actually answer any of these questions properly without having their voices in your head too. So the truth is that is the missing voice in this room today. It is your audience member. And I would say if you do nothing else coming out of this, talk to your audience. And specifically, go to your best fans. And we all talk to our customers or our clients, and it's all, we have those transactions. But it can be quite revealing when you actually step back and have a larger conversation, or a simpler conversation, or a more casual conversation that is about, like, what do you love about us? What do you think other organizations or artists can learn from us? Essentially, what makes us different in your eyes? Why do you care about us? So, again, partly because we don't have that resource in the room today, and because I don't have enough time with you, frankly, I'm going to focus on the other two parts of the question. But this question about how do they think about it, and finding that marriage between what you think and believe and care about and what your audience does, is one of the pieces of the puzzle. So you might remember, as we move up, right, at the bottom was because they connect with you. The second thing up there was because they believe in you, because they believe in what you're trying to do. And that is really a version of purpose. So, for instance, there's a guy named Simon Sinek who wrote a book called Start With Why, which is, like in my circles, has been all the rage for a few years now. And really his whole thing was, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Right? People are inspired by why you do it. And the truth is, this is a really useful question to answer, not just for external stakeholders or audience members, but for the people inside your organization. When you're really clear actually about what you're trying to do, it can be very powerful. So the first kind of question of the day that I'm going to have you think about is how you would complete the sentence. To blank, so that blank. To action, so that impact. It's very easy for me to stand up here as a consultant and say, essentially, I consult to make clients more successful. That is lame. So how do you answer this question in a way that's powerful? So the first thing is, let's talk about where you might look for it. One place you might look is your origin story. How did your organization start? Or what was the moment when you became an artist? What was it that drew you? Because often in the seed of that story is actually the answer to that question. So for instance, I'm working with a private school in Toronto, and it's very competitive, and they're really struggling because while for many years they were seen as sort of a leader for their kind of thing, now everybody does their kind of thing. And somebody told a story that is sort of lore in the organization that said, oh, well, actually one of the founders of the school was this corporate bigwig who said, you know what makes people successful? You know who's successful actually out in the world? It's not the A+ students. It's the people who are good with people. That story kind of is the seed of the entire story and everything that's happened in all the years since that school was founded. The second place you can look is best show ever. So what I mean by that is, if you think about you or your organization at your best, in your flow, if you're an artist, what is that? What's happening there? What is pulling you there? The third piece is what I'll call imagine a world. And imagine a world is really, if you could imagine a better world, a different world, that your organization or that you wish you could achieve. What is that? So the truth is, I'm going to shut up for a second because I actually want people to think about these questions. So just take a few minutes, and you might gravitate more than one question than the other. Just take a minute to think about these questions for yourselves and for your organizations. as you're thinking about that, I'm going to give you a gut check, which is that generally when you first start trying to answer this question, you can go two places. One is you can go high, right? We want to entertain. We want to educate. We want to inspire. And the truth is, it's not that those are the wrong answer, but it's that it's easy for these to go so broad as making clients so successful. So you want to think about, am I too high? And likewise, you don't want to get too low, right? So it's not about the brass tacks of what you do every day. So it's not, we put on productions that. And I'll tell you, in a way to give away my own thunder, when I wrestled with this question, and I circled personally in my own, right? I'm just a guy. But I circled this question in my own life for a long time. And eventually what I came to was to articulate, because I'm good at articulating, so that people move forward. And that last piece was the hardest piece to crack, because it was easy to say, for instance, I articulate because I want to do the best work possible, for instance. I want to be excellent. But when I realized that when my clients come to me, or when my audience, really what they came because they were actually often stuck. They actually had felt like, we know that there's something on the other side of that wall, but we don't know how to get there. And when they came to that, when I realized, oh, that is the way that they see the problem, I was able to say, oh, it's really just, they just want to move forward already. Like, who cares? Like, geez, I wish we had the story so that we could just move on with clarity. So again, we're going to move on from this question, but 3 places to look. Don't go too high or too low. The next thing is, how do you think about how you're different? This is an upside down black sheep. And one way to think about this question is, what do we do that no one else will or can? So again, what's going to make people stop and look? So the truth is there's lots of different places to look for this, but here are 3. So one is, sometimes the answer can be in your process, actually. So for instance, it can be about either your creative process, your workshopping process. Sometimes for organizations, it's about their focus, right? So we only do Maritimes art. And the third is your audience, right? So is there a specific audience that you're focused on? So several people in the room, when they talked about their organization, said youth. Now, one thing I'll say is that the world's really competitive. So it's quite likely that you might have an answer to this question, to these questions. You might think like, well, that clearly is what makes us different, and yet it won't be enough. So sometimes what you have to do is combine differences in an interesting way. And sometimes what it is with differences is actually you're playing with different ways of packaging your difference so that it stands out more. You have to accentuate that difference. So there are a few ways to do this. One, again, think about blending, or how do you amp up certain differences, not others. Another is make it your own. Literally how you say it, right? How you project it, whether it's visually or in words, that can be a powerful marker of difference that makes people sort of look twice at your difference. The second thing I'll say is make it concrete, right? People can't respond to abstractions like we have a more collaborative process. So what does that really mean? Or we are more engaged or engaging. what does that really mean? And again, a good place to look for that is talk to your audience, talk to your biggest fans. And that's that last piece, is put it in their terms. So this is a very different kind of industry example than yours, but it's useful in this context. So I worked with a big company, and they did, I think I can say this, they did payroll, right? Not a particularly exciting thing. And they, inside the company, you ask the question, what makes you different? They all said, world-class service. We give world-class service. And when you talk to customers, and you said, what's important to you? They would put first, always, reliability. And last, they would put world-class service. Literally, they would be given a ranking, and they would put world-class service like 20th. And when we went and actually talked to customers and said, well, first of all, we couldn't figure out what was going on. And when we went and talked to customers and said, what do you mean, what do you really mean by reliability? First of all of our assumptions were wrong. We were like, oh, you mean the system never breaks? Nope, that wasn't it. It means everybody gets paid. No, that wasn't really it. It was actually that you had these people in organizations who nobody ever thought about them until something went wrong, and then they were in a lot of trouble, and all they wanted is that they could pick up the phone and call somebody who was gonna fix it. So actually, what they were talking about when they said reliability was what this company knew they were best at. They were just using language for it that was not how the customer thought about it. I am going, well, I'm going to keep going. So the truth is that is in a nutshell. I know I'm moving quickly. Why do you matter? Because you're different, right? What do you do that no one else will? Because they believe in what you're trying to do. What is that why statement? What is your purpose that sort of draws people to you? And why? You know, because they feel connected to you. How do you connect with your audience? How do you find that common ground in terms of what you care about and how you think, and what they care about and how they think? I see two questions in that question, and they're both wonderful questions. So the first question is, we have lots of different audiences. How do we make one story for why we matter that appeals to all of them? And then the second question in my mind is, well, in this case, our orchestra has a wonderful sound, and that feels like there's a nugget there, and sort of how do we work with that in a way? Is that fair enough? Yeah. So let me answer the first question first, because it's a great question. And the truth is, you will talk to other people who do my job who have a different perspective on this. So next time you go to a different presentation, ask them the same question. I think that often there is what I will call a sweet spot audience member. And if you try to understand, and sometimes it's not an actual audience member, it's almost like I think about it as a composite. And if you hit that person right, if your story hits that person right, then it will kind of radiate out from them. So again, I'm going to give you another example from a totally different industry, just because I worked on it. So the example was, I worked with a company where what they did was, it's a website essentially where you can go and trade your frequent flyer miles and your loyalty points from all different things. And they had always thought that their customer was road warriors. It was people with a gazillion frequent flyer miles, right? So they were going after like business people flying all over. And when we started talking to customers, it turned out that actually who their customer was were people who were obsessive points collectors. And there are, much to my surprise, I'm not one of these people, there are a lot of those people, like a lot, who just like, it kills them to lose the chance to earn a point or a mile. Is anybody here like that? Does that resonate with anybody? So we started to reshape the story to speak to those people. And the truth is, in speaking to those people, that story also worked for that other audience. It also worked for road warriors, for these super frequent flyer people. And often that is, in my experience, what happens. That if you actually have that vision of the right customer or the right audience member in mind, and you get their story right, it tends to work for other audiences because they also can see that that's sort of where the heart of the story is. Does that answer make sense? So then the other question was sound. So the sound of the orchestra, can we build a story around that? And this I would call akin to, often I will work with professional services firms, and they will say, what we are great at is service. Or it can be a product firm, and they'll say, like, what we're amazing at is quality. And I would say you can't differentiate on either of those things, which is to say, at least thinking about it that way, it won't go anywhere. Because everybody, unless somebody works with you, unless somebody has gone and seen it, they can't imagine it, they don't believe it, everybody says it. And so the question...
What you're saying is then you haven't built any trust.
You haven't built any trust. So again, it can be a different experience for people who, and this is where sometimes the distinction between current audience members and attracting new audience members is different. Where your current audience members actually have a much better sense of actually why you're great. How do you communicate that to new audience members in a way that pulls them in? And the truth is, you need to find a way to reframe it in some way that they get or that pulls their eye. So just for instance, I worked with another, compared to you guys, very boring business. This business did essentially, they were consultants for health benefit plans. And they came and they were like, we are crazy about service. And their client said, we are crazy about service. And nobody outside, nobody who wasn't a client had any idea who they were. So for that company, we just built not a massive, but we built a story that really said, like, what does it mean when we say that? So for them, we started saying, like, we will make it right for you from the biggest picture to the smallest detail. And we had a million ways of talking about that, right? How we're great at seeing sort of all the big strategic questions, but then, like, you can give us this time, like, we got to stuff envelopes, so we will do that for you. And prospective clients had never seen such a thing. They just knew that all the other people that they were considering didn't do that. So again, we had to make it concrete in a certain way, and we just had to think of a way to reframe it so it felt relevant and different. That was a long answer to those two questions. Thank you for bearing with me. Other questions? Yeah.
It's the reverse of what that person asked up front, actually.
Yeah.
What happens if your focus is a unique focus that's not really anything at the moment?
Oh, good question. What happens if your unique focus is not the in thing at the moment? So my hunch, well, first of all, let me ask, and please feel free to say no. Can I ask what your focus is?
Immersion filmmaking. Filmmaking on film.
On actual film? So, well, so filmmaking on film, oh great, this is great, this is a great challenge. So the first thing I would do is figure out, again, this is a great example of where I think looking to your best fans and figuring out what is it that they respond to about film, and then trying to figure out how to package that for a larger audience. So for instance, like there might be a story there about, first of all, the answer is not film. The answer, there is something behind that in that why. And whether that is preservation of craft or something about texture or something about the kind of director who is most likely to use it. Those are all different ways of thinking about that. So again, there's always, particularly with, even when nobody seems to care or it seems out of fashion, there's always a reason that actually the people who are holding on to it hold on to it. And it's just about mine that, go after that, and then figure out, okay, how do we reflect that back to the world? Because the truth is nobody wants to see, for instance, nobody likes to see the death of craft. Or nobody, right? So that's my hunch about that. I like those kinds of questions of like, sorry. Yeah.
I'm not in the arts. I work for a nonprofit in social services. But our struggle telling our story is that we do so many different things in one is encapsulating that. Like we're a school, we're a mental health facility, we're a child care, we're a social services center. We're all of those things in one, and we serve two different clients at once. So it's like, how do you distill it down? So, you know, and I'm always finding like I don't know who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
And what part of it they're going to respond to. If they're going to respond to the babies, the education,
Yeah.
mental health.
I'm loving this question session. So the question was, when you do lots of different things, potentially for different audiences, how do you tell one succinct story? So the first thing is what not to do. Don't list shit. Okay? In my experience, one of the first places that I often try to bring clients is think of the metaphor. What's the metaphor, right? That sort of encapsulates those different things you do. So another example from a totally different industry. So I worked with this design firm, and they just did lots of different things. Like sometimes they would design chairs, and sometimes they would do barbecues, but sometimes they would like redesign like processes for doctors to talk to patients, and sometimes they would do this really deep research, and nobody could understand what the heck they were talking about. So for them, we came up with, you guys are the bridge. You are the bridge between strategy and tactics for your clients, between research and essentially reality, and between generally, the big idea was you're the bridge between knowledge and action. So you figure out what people know, and then you turn that into something. And again, that tied really right back to when their audience came in the door, what were they stuck on? What was the mindset that they were walking in the door with? Which was that like, we kind of know what our strategy is, but every time we try something, it fails or it breaks, or we can't make it work internally. So metaphor can be really helpful in that context. Any other questions? I feel like there was oh yeah, Joel?
How do you know if you're like in the zone before you go to print?
Yeah.
Do you recommend testing some sort of way?
So I recommend, so again, so this is a thing where the way I do my business is one way, and there's lots of ways to do it. But the nature of who I am is, first of all, I want as many voices at the table as I can. Particularly, honestly, so this isn't the focus of this conversation, if you're in an organization, engaging people in this conversation is very powerful. Asking what they think the answer to these questions are, and then working with them to answer these questions can be a very powerful moment for an organization. Particularly, like, you've had two organizations merge, or your organization is like totally changing, or there's been some real disruption, or you just feel a little lost. It can just be a very powerful moment for people to step back and try to answer the question together. And then I would say, iterate the heck out of it, right? So you're gonna try, to me, testing is good, and test with everybody, and test all the time, and the process, if you're doing it, is like, what if we do it this way? And you share that with people, and they're like, that doesn't really make sense. And then you're like, oh, well, why not? And they're like, well, because like there's that thing at the end that's just jarring, and you're like, oh, what if I did it this way? So honestly, in these projects, often, to get to articulate so that people move forward, I had like 50 versions. And with each of those versions, before I got to that point, I just said like, I shared it with my wife. I shared it with people I work with. I shared like, does that make sense? And people would be like, nah, that sounds like everybody else, or that doesn't quite work. And so when you hit the right thing, honestly, people, in my experience, people, and you don't need quantitative research to show this, people respond to it. You can show it to your best fan, and they'll be like, yeah, That is what you do. That is why you're important. Where am I at? 2:10. I got 5 more minutes.
How often do you revisit that?
How often do you revisit that? Okay, great question. How often do you revisit that? So, in my experience, your why you matter, if you get it right, shouldn't change much long term. It's not something you need. You should, if you have to revisit it every 3 years, you probably don't have the right answer, actually, right? Because you're looking at, imagine a world, right? Those sorts of scenarios, like what is my purpose in life? I don't actually change my purpose in life all the time based on market conditions. If you hit the right thing, it's the right thing. Sometimes how you differentiate yourself has to change, right? Because sometimes, again, you can do something and you'd be like, this is what's different about us. And then honestly, if you do that right, 3 years, everybody's copying you. So you got to figure out, all right, how are we going to define that piece, redefine that piece? Does that help? All right, so I promised, like, how do you grow your audience when you have no time and less money? So just getting the story right, figuring out your story, getting clear on it. Clarity really takes lots of noise out of the system. And so that's really has been the focus that we've talked about. But actually, once you have it, this was the question before, what do you do with it? And what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to share marketing ideas as such. So I'm not going to say like, well, here's where you advertise, or here's really what you do on social media. But just a few key things. One is recognize, for most people in this room, I think, that your most powerful moment with your audience is when you are in contact with them. It is when they come for a show. It is when you show your work. And the degree to which you can think outside of the work, of the performance, and think about the rest of that moment that they are in your space as an experience that reflects that story, is good, right? And that can be as simple as, well, it can be as simple as what I didn't do this intentionally, but as simple as what I did with you all at the beginning, which was just a way of shaping the experience. It didn't cost me anything, and it actually helped me. Or it can be as simple as having some way for people to interact after a performance in a way that's really shareable with the outside world once they leave the theater or leave the space, right? So think about, and in general, I would say, really think about where are you currently touching people, and then see how you can make it shareable. Similar to that is shine a spotlight on your biggest fans. In the world of making things shareable, the people who are most likely to share are the people who you already really care about you and own you. So first of all, you want to really nourish them. You want to give them stuff. You want to pay attention to them. You want to make them feel how much you value them. And you sort of want to guide and give them opportunities to share that outside with other people. And sometimes that's as simple as, honestly, right now I'm working with a phone company, and once they sent people chocolates, and it has nothing to do with their business, but I can't tell you how often people talk about those chocolates. And that in itself is a powerful signal for that company about, like, we care about you. And so, again, I would discourage you actually from just doing random stuff for people. But if you can do it in a way that furthers your story, that is aligned with your story, that can be powerful. And those people who are already coming, who are already your best customers, let them be your evangelists. Give them the tools to be your evangelists. The third thing I'll say is, again, and this is in the world of thinking about where do you have leverage on people who will influence other people, or ways to sort of spread things out into the world without actually doing much more work or spending time on it. And it's that the degree to which one key influencer in the world, for many of you, is critics. And so I would say, be friends with your critics, right? Like, follow them on social media, like, engage in conversation with them. I'm not saying kiss up to them, I'm not saying give them stuff. I'm saying be in conversation with them to the degree that you can be, so that they see that you're part of their conversation. And they're more likely, A, to give you a second look, and to come and to sort of have you embedded. So those are just 3 ideas. I'm at 2:15. Any other questions? Yes?
What are you doing for your birthday?
What am I doing for my birthday? I'm here. I'm here. It's my son's. So I'm here. I get home at like 8:30 tonight. It's my son's birthday party tomorrow. His birthday is later in June, but we're having an elaborate jailbreak scenario that requires immense planning, where kids have to crack open rocks and find keys and go collect weapons. So I'm doing that tonight. Yes.
What about when you consult with people and they don't really tell you what you want to hear? So they don't tell you that they value the things that you really value about yourself?
Good question. So the question is, what happens when you consult with people and they don't tell you what they want to hear? What you want to hear. They don't tell you the things that you value about yourself. So first of all, I would say use the process, which is to say one of the most powerful things you can do, particularly if you have an organization who has stakeholders who are outliers. Do not go come up with your story and then bring it to them at the end and show it to them, because they will kill it. It doesn't matter how right it is. So you want them in your fold, and you actually want them early. The only other thing I could say is really what you want to go after, what you really want to go after with your story is kind of that sweet spot of common ground. And often that sweet spot of common ground is something that even people who normally, like I've worked with companies where there are like very different parts of the business and they each hate each other. And then when we found the right story, it was like, oh, it's very clear to me how we help each other and how we're on the same page. And so I don't know that I can be more specific than that, but look for common ground. Thank you. Oh, there's one.
One last question.
Yes.
I'm just thinking from a visual art, I do gloss.
Yeah.
So it's a product.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if this is something with branding and content, but to create a story around, let's say, a series of pieces.
Yeah.
And to make it an interesting story and a limited edition or something. I don't know, does that kind of come into branding story of, well, here's what, a series along this line or
Yeah.
that line, or like to make it limited, so
Exclusivity? Yeah, so exclusivity can be really powerful. It just becomes very important to understand what actually motivates your target, your audience, right? So don't tell, you just want to be careful that you're not telling the story that you want or that you think makes it valuable. What's the story that's going to make it valuable to them? So honestly, some types of audiences are really valued by status. They want to be the first to know. And then there are other types of audiences that really value being behind the scenes because they're really interested in process. So I would just say think about what matters to them. Thank you all so much.